to talk about lockout tagout, and this specific one we're going to talk about affected employees. You'll see the different levels of employees as we go through the presentation. Um, but again, this is not a substitute for the authorized employees that there's further training that they need. So this training session focuses on lockout tagout, safety procedures, safety measures, protect our workers from unexpected equipment startup or stored energy during maintenance or after being turned off. You're considered to be an effective employee if you operate equipment being serviced or you're in the area while it's being serviced. Common roles include material handling, welders. This session does not address during regular production or operation of the equipment. All right. So this course is designed to help you understand the roles preventing accidents caused by energy, hazardous energy release. As an affected employee, you may not be doing service yourself, but still need to be aware of when lockout tagout applies and how to protect yourself. While walking around, knowing how to identify risks, what actions to take, and when to speak up and don't look. All right. So learning objectives for this, again, we're going to recognize responsibilities of the affected person, identify hazardous energy sources in your area, understand when lockout tagout applies and why it matters, stay safe when working near equipment, undergoing maintenance, and then finally know when to ask or alert your supervisor. So one of the things as we go through this, the program, is called Lockout Tagout, and for the most part, whenever we're servicing this piece of equipment, we need to make sure that we physically have a lock on there. But there's going to be some times that we can't do that because maybe we don't have the right lockout barriers, or maybe there's just not one designed for that. So my point to this is as we go through this, whether there's a physical lock on there or if there's just a tag on there that says do not operate. An example may be some vehicles, maybe there's something that goes over the steering wheel that doesn't prevent you from operating that, but it goes over the steering wheel and tells you it's out of service. So those should weigh just as much as a physical lock does. All right. What is a hazardous energy? So hazardous energy refers to the energy source that is caused injury or unexpected release. So as we are working on something, capacitors, sometimes pneumatic, things like that, maybe some stored energy. So we got to make sure that we've got all that shut off and purged through the system so that that doesn't affect somebody down the stream. All right, present during normal operations again. So maybe you're just working around that as it's being maintenance or being serviced. Can remain after shut off the unexpected machine startup or release of stored energy. So we just talked about that. For some reason, we don't purge the system and it accidentally starts up or moves with that stored energy that's been released. And then the types of isolation or the types of hazardous energy we're going to talk about. It's going to be electrical, mechanical, hydraulic, pneumatic, thermal, chemical. Often these are invisible dangers that may not be totally obvious. This may also be a situation to where the lockout tagout for this is not in the direct area of where this is being serviced. So you may flip a switch, down the road or down the hallway, and it might affect the person that's operating on that at that time. So recognizing stored energy risks. So we're going to take a look at, hazardous energy stored in a machine or equipment, or that can build up after shutdown, can still cause serious injuries without accidental startups. Some examples of this might be machine parts that are still moving or have potentially to move after the shutdown, like flywheels, pressurized hydraulic systems, heat and cold that remains in the equipment due to chemical, cryological reaction, even even friction, gravity that can cause parts to shift or fall unexpectedly, pressurized fluids, air, gas trapped in the pipes, or system that can suddenly release even after the machine is shut off or the equipment is shut off. This includes injection molding equipment, vehicle lifts, or other types of presses, steam that remains pressurized in the tank, chemicals that may still react even though the equipment is shut down. So one of the things that most of you probably are going to identify the most with is going to be pumps, especially in our wastewater and our waterworks areas. So, by somebody servicing those or working on those, again, what could that, energy do to the person working on that or people working in that area? Hazardous energy types of injuries. So federal OSHA and Indiana OSHA estimates that every year tens of thousands of employees are injured caused by unexpected hazardous release of hazardous energy and may be preventable. On an average, a worker injured about every 24 days that takes to recover. Some face serious injuries, burns, and things of that nature. So again, 24 days on these types of injuries are an average as to how long they're going to be away from work, off of work. Okay. So it's going to add significant issues to your operation, certainly. Recently, a printer press operator returned from lunch to find the machine was turned off. He looked at it, saw nothing wrong, and then pushed the start button. There were several checks, clicks, and bangs. Then the shop mechanic came over from behind the machine and said his wrist might have been broken because of the wrench he was using, jumped forward when the machine started. So again, making sure that, not only your obligation if you do see something, but obviously whoever the authorized person is, making sure that they are following the procedures through as well and actually physically locking that out. The energy source that the machine has not isolated and not locked out, and there's no tag warning the operator that not to start it up. So again, making sure that that is being taken care of when we're servicing that as well. So again, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, 80% or 4 of every 5 of these incidents happen because steps are shortcuts or steps are missed or not taken properly. So again, making sure that we take a look at this. Just as an added note, the affected person, or I'm sorry, the authorized person, OSHA actually spells out exactly, not only their training, but also an audit process to make sure that they know exactly how to take something out of service and bring it back into service, including locking it out and also purging the system to make sure that there's no stored energy. Controlling hazardous energy, again, to prevent injuries, turn off and disconnect the equipment from its isolation source. Before servicing, using lockout devices to prevent the machine from starting up or machine parts from moving. and then use tagout devices to warn when the operators not to operate. So again, making sure that we're physically locking that out. And part of the standard actually calls for two different isolation areas, so that those are isolated. The authorized person then makes sure that there's no stored energy, and then also making sure that they've got some sort of tag or some sort of warning system there to let people know that it's out of service and not to try to operate that particular piece of equipment. All right. When lockout tagout, or when should we utilize lockout tagout? So lockout tagout, certain services and maintenance tasks like installing, adjusting, inspecting equipment can expose workers to hazardous energy. These are expected types of situations where lockout tagout procedures are essential. So making sure that the process is part of that. And part of this as well, this comes back to your job hazard analysis and your operational procedures as far as, how do we take this out of service? How do we bring it back into service? And a step by step that also helps with the authorized person to be able to do those types of activities, the service or the maintenance of the equipment. So some common examples might include lubricating moving parts, setting up equipment for operation, cleaning or unjamming the equipment, replacing or changing tools or parts. These are some of the routine things that would include for lockout tagout in order for us to properly service those. So normal operations. So certain, again, certain services and maintenance tasks like, sorry. There's certain things that sometimes we don't have to utilize lockout tagout, because a lot of times they will have controls on those. That's, for example, might be a stamping machine or something like that, that you're able to take the part out, put a new part in, but then you pull your hands away, and typically you'll be pushing on two operational buttons at the same time. So that way, your hands or any body parts not in the operational areas of that. So even during normal operation, lockout tagout may be required when a safety device is removed or bypassed. So if there's an issue with that two button system, we may have to lock it out because it's not operating properly, or any body parts is placed in harm's way. So again, maybe it's a situation to where we've got to clear a jam, or we've got to do something that we may need to make sure we lock that out, isolate the energy, and then proceed with whatever that operation is to work on it. Roles and responsibilities. So we just talked about that a minute ago. Again, roles and responsibilities. All employees play a role in working safely around hazardous energy. Again, authorized employees perform service maintenance and apply lockout tagout. So again, these are the folks that's going to be doing whatever type of work on that piece of equipment, not necessarily just the operation of that equipment, but if there's something that goes wrong, a part needs to be replaced, services, sometimes lubrication, or even the change out of tool parts, something like that. Those are the folks that's going to handle that. Affected employees, the training that we're talking about now. So operates the machinery, but maybe they don't service them. So again, what does that look like for you? You're just working in the area, and you may come across to where somebody's locked that out to be working on that. So that's what this awareness training is today. and then other employees working near the machines being serviced. So this may just be people that's working in the area. This may be people, this might be visitors. Making sure that a lot of times with our waterworks, our wastewater plants, things like that, sometimes we have tours, students come in, look at it, things of that nature. So it's important to make sure that we're giving them some basic information. If you were to see a tag or a warning sign, things like that, just to steer clear of it, not to mess with it. And then specialized workers may require additional lockout tagout training. Again, this is where if you are an authorized employee, that there is a yearly audit that needs to take place. So basically what that means is randomly pick a piece of equipment that's in your inventory for lockout tagout, and then have that person demonstrate how to take it out of service, purge the energy, do whatever they need to do, and then bring it back into service. Your responsibility. So as an affected employee, your responsibilities again, reporting when equipment needs service or repairs. So again, identifying something's not working right. Maybe that's a pump or things of that nature. Maybe it's making noise. So having a clear process as to when we are going to notify somebody and when we need to take that out of service. Keeping clear of the equipment while lockout tagout work is being performed. So again, that piece is out of service. So we're not going to be doing anything with that until it's brought back into service. Never touch lockout tagout devices. Clearly, just whoever puts that on takes that off. On a side note, your policies and procedures for this also needs to make sure that whoever puts that lock on takes that lock off with no exceptions. If that person is unavailable for whatever reason, let's say a maintenance guy put something on a Friday afternoon, forgot to take it off, and somebody needs to do something that with that piece of equipment, we can't just go up and cut that lock off. There needs to be a procedure in your process or in your policies as to we've got to notify that person, try to make every effort for them to come back and take that lock off. If not, then there needs to be a process of more than one person identifies and is able to cut that lock off at that time. It doesn't mean that we've got two sets of keys for anything, things of that nature. So just some pointers for lockout tagout program or procedure for your facilities. And then confirming that it's safe to use after servicing. So making sure that not only do we bring it back into service and then we operate it to make sure that it is operating properly before we turn it over to whoever's going to be the operator for that. Management's responsibility to protect employees from hazardous energy. Management must create and maintain a lockout tagout program. So we just talked about that. It needs to have a written policy and procedure on, who is the authorized person, who's the affected folks, and then also who is others or people that may be affected in that area. So not only does it need to be a written program, but it also needs to make sure that we cover that with all of our employees so that they understand that as well. And then ensure equipment is fully de-energized during service. Again, we talked about before having that audit. So whoever the authorized person is going to be dealing with that servicing of that equipment. So an annual audit to have them demonstrate that they know what they're doing and they know the process and procedure. But again, also making sure that we have a job hazard analysis for that particular process so that we've got a step-by-step on how to de-energize, purge, and then bring it back into service. Help everyone understand the risks. So again, the training and employees based on their roles. So making sure that everybody understands what lockout tagout is so that we don't accidentally start something up that could affect somebody down the stream. And then regularly review and update your programs. So just like any type of service or any type of safety programs, at least on an annual basis, we're reviewing those to make sure that there's not been any changes. Or if we've got a new piece of equipment or things change, then we need to review those and update those programs as well during that process. All right, devices and equipment. Again, so energy isolation devices. Energy isolation devices disconnect the equipment from the energy source to prevent the unexpected release. So some of these examples might be circuit breakers, pressure valves, machine blocks. Okay, emergency stops are not an isolation form or acceptable. So again, it needs to be something that we physically are turning the um, that energy source away, blocking it, or whatever the case is from getting back to that piece of equipment. Lockout devices. So in your lockout tagout kits, you should have different types of devices that maybe, like an example here would be a valve lock so that you can't turn that valve on or off. And then it's padlocked as well. There may be some others in there that isolates circuit breakers so that you put it on there and that you can't turn that circuit breaker back on. Okay, so these devices again must be strong and tamper resistant. What I mean is can't be defeated easily to bypass those. Um, Able to fully block the energy source. So again, we take a look at, is it a circuit breaker? Is it a block device or something that again prevents anybody from re-energizing that piece of equipment? So common types of lockout tag include locks, blocks, chains, multi-lock hasps, valve covers, multiple lock hasps. A lot of times you may see those hanging on there, and they've got room for not only one lock but several locks, because you may have to the process or the procedures state that anybody working on that needs to have their lock on there. So you may have contractors in there, you may have other departments in there, so everybody needs to isolate that as well. So you may have 3 or 4 locks on something just to make sure that it's not getting re-energized because of lack of communication someplace. Tag out devices, again, devices that warn only tools. So this does not physically stop the equipment from being turned on. So again, we talked about this before. For the most part, we need to make sure that we're locking that out, physically locking so that folks cannot operate that or cannot re-energize that. But there may be times that that's not possible. So a tag device should weigh just as much as a physical lock. But anytime that we are doing any type of lockout tagout, not only do we lock that out, but we've also got that warning as well so that people know that this is out of service, to not operate this while it's being serviced from another department. To be effective, you must be easy to read, secured attached near the energy source device, tough enough to resist weather or wear and damage, and removed only by the authorized employees. So again, same thing as a lock. Only authorized employees, whoever put it on, are the ones that be able to take it off. And with this tag, just making sure that it's a warning system that people need to steer clear of that particular piece of equipment while it's being serviced. Requirements for devices to be effective. All lockout tagout devices must be durable, standardized. Okay. So most of the time you'll have a lockout tagout kit that will have different types of lockout devices in there. So here's some examples on the right here where it's a plug lockout. So we've unplugged it from the energy source and we've put this around there so that nobody can plug that back in. So that's one means of a lockout with that. And again, it might be a situation where you see the yellow there at the bottom is the multi-hast. So you may hook that on there and have several different locks on there, depending upon who all's working on that piece of equipment in that area. And then finally, you'll see the warning device on there as well to make sure that people understand not to operate that piece of equipment while it's being serviced. Equipment required devices, common equipment that may need lockout tagout during service or maintenance. Again, these could be presses, power saws, conveyors, pumps, furnaces, trash compactors. So whatever that looks like for your facilities, identify those areas that may need lockout tagout when doing servicing and things of that nature. I know a lot of us have the trash compactors, things like that, and just making sure that we've got to, even if we got to go in and clear jams or anything of that nature, that we've got a process in place that we're locking that out so that somebody doesn't accidentally come up and push that button while we're down there trying to clear that jam. Um, there are a few situations where lockout tagout may not be required. Again, so we talked about some of this operational with the pieces of equipment, routine tasks that are part of normal operation, plug in equipment under exclusive employee control, and then hot tap operations with shutdown isn't practical. So again, maybe we're changing out a piece of equipment or we're changing out a whatever, maybe it's a stamp and we've got a piece of metal in there, it stamps and we're able to reach in, pull it out. But again, there's safety devices for that so that we're keeping our hands away from the operational parts, and the operational parts can't take place when our hands are in there. So whatever that looks like for you guys, again, a lot of times maybe pumps, things of that nature, or we just talked about the trash compactors. So again, what does that look like? Maybe we talk about how we do this to take individuals or employees away from the harm. So again, instead of going down and clearing that jam or something, maybe we've got a process to where we're able to grab it with a piece of equipment or something so that we're not getting into that harm's way. All right, procedures in action. So again, de-energize or lockout, tag out procedures. To properly energize, lockout, tag out equipment, an authorized employee will notify the affected employees. So not only do we just slap the tag on it, but we also need to let folks know, hey, we're going to be servicing or we're going to be working on this piece of equipment. Shut down the energized equipment, isolate the energy source from the equipment, lock it out, tag it out, the energy isolation device, release any stored energy. So again, once we've locked it out, everything of that nature, and maybe we go back and it's a startup, a start button or something like that, we try to push it just to make sure that there is no stored energy in there. And then we verify that the energy source has been de-energized for that particular piece of equipment. And then the restart procedures to restart the equipment after lockout tagout. Authorized employees will inspect and clean the area, ensure the area is clear for employees, and alert them before you start it back up. So let them know this is back in service. We're going to test it, and then before we turn it over to the operator. Remove locks, tags, restore the energy source, and then restart the equipment. Make sure that it runs efficiently before we turn it back over. All right, so some key points to remember. Again, critical reminders for affected employees. Hazardous energy includes electric, steam, gravity, moving parts. Most serious injuries happen when employees fail to properly disconnect the power source. Most of you have heard me say, when we talk about shortcuts and things of that nature, we are municipalities, so there really should be no reason for shortcuts. We should always make sure that we're following through that process of whatever we got established. So again, that we're not hurting somebody, and we're not there to gain 10 minutes faster or anything of that nature. We're there to make sure that we're doing it properly and that people are not getting hurt in that process. Only trained and authorized employees perform lockout tagout. So again, a lot of times we may just have a lockout kit there, and just making sure that that's just not for anybody, or if it is for anybody, that everybody is trained to be the authorized employees to be able to lock that out as well. Stay clear of the equipment that's locked or tagged out. Locks prevent tags warning. So again, making sure that we physically prevent it from being restarted. If not, at least we've got a tag on there, and everybody should be trained to, if you see a tag, just steer clear. And then written procedures required when hazardous energy is involved. Again, making sure we got a policy of procedures for this particular operation, which is going to include, the affected employees, other employees, and then the authorized employees and their roles, and the audit program that we talked about before. All right. Any questions on anything that we just covered through? Again, this is an overall training to, an awareness training for everybody. Further training needs to be for the authorized individuals. Will need to take place, more in-depth type of trainings. All right. So if there's no questions, comments, concerns, I'll give you a little bit of time back today. So if you do have any questions, certainly you can email us, so something in the chat, whatever the case is, we'll try to answer as much as we can. And then finally, not only for lockout tagout, but for anything else, that you need assistance with, as far as risk management, certainly make sure that you're reaching out to the risk management team, and we'll be able to help you in those areas when we can. All right. Thank you.